Hello VC, this is a response to H2Vinyl's 200 subs contest. I want to congratulate you on your 200 subs there, H2Vinyl. And your first question is, show 5 labels and the groups you associate with that label, or the artists you associate with that label. So, I'll start with a label that when I started digging through records again, several years ago, constantly I found that any group on this particular label I liked. And it got to the point where if I saw a record and I did not recognize the band, but it was on this label, I bought the record. I was buying a record specifically for the label. And that label was Uni. And one of the bands I most associate with Uni is Strawberry Alarm Clock. So there we have here the Uni label. That's the back of the cover. I found almost every artist on this label I really liked. Second label, very similar to Uni, and I found out just about every record I found on this particular label, I really liked the artist. And that was the Yellow Epic label. And the artist I most associate with them is the Yardbirds. And here we have the Yellow Epic label. Lots of great artists on that label. The next label I'll show is Capitol. When you mention Capitol label, many people think of the rainbow label with the logo at the top. And that's mostly, I guess, because of the Beatles having sold millions of copies of records in North America on the Capitol Rainbow label. That becomes a very common label. But the Capitol label that comes to mind, to me, is one that was a little bit earlier, from the late 50s to early 60s. And that was the Capitol label that had the Capitol little insignia on the side rather than on the top of the label. And the artist I associate with that is one of my all-time favorites, Wanda Jackson. And I'll show you the label. You know, here it's still a bit of a rainbow, but the Capitol is on the side, not at the top. The next label I'll show, again, is a label that whenever I see it, I'll just buy the record, even if I don't recognize what it is. And this particular label is associated a lot with soundtracks, in particular B-movie soundtracks. That label is Sidewalk, a label started by Mike Kerr when he was very young, I think like 18 years old. A lot of unusual pressings on that label, soundtracks, and one of my all-time favorites on the Sidewalk label is Teenage Rebellion. And we'll show the label on that one. Sidewalk label. The fifth and last label that I'll show is one I don't think there's a great number of pressings on it. I don't think they were around a long time. In the mid-60s where they were around. And that is the Redbird label, which I believe eventually got bought by Mercury. But of course, when you mention the Redbird label, the band that immediately comes to mind is the Shangri-Las. And we'll have a look at that label. So those are 5 labels that I always keep an eye out for when I'm digging through vinyl crates. There's a few other labels too that are quite good. I know Dalton, I always associate it with the Ventures, the early 60s Ventures albums, which were quite good. So the second question is, tell a short vinyl story. So I'm going to just briefly go over a little story in vinyl collecting. And that's where a number of years ago, once I got back into collecting vinyl records, I wanted to try and find a place where I could find vinyl, because at that time the vinyl resurgence hadn't started yet. And vinyl wasn't very plentiful. Everything was CDs. I soon discovered that the center of vinyl collection, and basically in my province where I live, was actually walking distance from my house. A 15-minute walk or a 2-minute drive. There was a flea market there. And every Sunday would be the only day the flea market was open, all the vinyl collectors and sellers would meet there. And there would be a huge number of records up for sale. Once I discovered that place, I immediately went to it. And for the next 10 years, I was there almost every Sunday. Very rarely did I ever miss a Sunday. And during those 10 years of going every Sunday, I must have bought thousands of records. It wasn't unusual for me to leave that place with 20 records under my arm. Also wasn't unusual sometimes to have to run out to a local plaza to an ATM machine and get cash and go back and pay for the records I had picked out. So, and that was a great time for vinyl collecting. I met a lot of interesting people, made a lot of friends there. It was absolutely wonderful place for vinyl. So I can remember the very first time I went there. So I just entered the place. It was packed, a little bit disoriented, trying to find where the vinyl collectors, because there's other things there besides vinyl. A lot of other vendors selling other things as well. But eventually I found where the vinyl guys were, and I immediately saw on the wall a record that I said, I gotta get this right away. It's my favorite singer. And that record, the very first record that I bought at that flea market, was this one. I paid $5 for the record. Now what's interesting about this record is that it's a German pressing. This is on the Liberty label, as all Julie London stuff is on Liberty. And in North America, they wouldn't allow this title. In North America, this record was titled Easy Does It. It's only in Germany that they had the title Lady Sex. I think this title was a little bit too edgy for North America. So anyways, this was the very first record I ever bought at that flea market. That's going back many years ago. So for 10 years, I went to that flea market, bought a lot of records, spent a lot of money, and finally the day came when the word went out that the flea market was shutting down. The person who owned the land was selling the land to a developer, and the flea market had to shut down. Needless to say, that was very depressing news. And I remember being there on the final Sunday that the flea market was open. And on that day, almost all the vendors had already left. The building was practically empty, just an empty concrete floor. There was a couple vendors left who were dismantling their little show area, taking down the wooden walls and that. And I hung out there for a few minutes speaking to those vendors. A couple of collectors showed up and we just chatted for a bit. And then finally I decided to leave. I went out into the parking lot, and the parking lot was empty. Nobody there, just a few parked cars, and I was by myself. As I was ready to walk to my car, a white van pulled up and a vendor got out. And I said to him, well, there's no point in setting up today because the flea market is closed. There's nobody here. He replied, well, I'll set up a table anyways and we'll just see what happens. So as he was unloading his van, and again, I'm the only person there in the parking lot, I asked him, did he have any boxes of records that had not yet been looked over? And he replied, yep, I put one together this morning. All new vinyl that I got this week. Have a look. He dropped the box in front of me, and I went through it, and I found one that was on my want list at the time. It was this one here. The jacket is a little bit of rust shape, but the vinyl was very good shape. And that's, of course, the Electra label. So, basically, these two records, Julie London, Stooges, are the bookends to 10 years, thousands of dollars and thousands of records of collecting at this flea market. First record I ever bought at the flea market, the very last record I ever bought at the flea market. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.